Hello and welcome. Glad to see everybody joining us. We will be starting in just a minute or two to let people join.
Columbus, Ohio. The
Ooh.
brave Columbus, Ohio.
Mhm. Denver, nice area. Durham, North Carolina, that is very close to me. We're going to be having a snug over in Cary, ServiceNow user group meeting on I think the 15th or 16th of October. So keep an eye out for that.
Grants Pass, awesome. Spartanburg, yeah.
Mm.
See Vancouver.
Ooh, India and Brazil,
Oh, yeah.
far-reaching.
Oh, India, thank you for joining us. I know it's probably late for
A
you.
little bit late.
Yeah.
All right. And we are right here at the top of the hour. Let's go ahead and get rolling today. First off, I do want to welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's Platform Academy. We are thrilled to kick off this session right at the top of the hour. And I am Sharon Barnes, your Platform Outbound Product Manager and today's host. And we have an incredible session lined up that I can't wait for us to dive into. But before we get started, let me share just a few quick logistics. These presentations are crafted with you in mind, and our goal is to inspire you with fresh ideas and practical use cases that are going to elevate your understanding of how our platform tools work and how to use them best. So feel free to fire away with your questions during the presentations. Just remember, post them in the Q&A section so that our amazing panelists can address them. Plus, don't worry if you miss something. The session's being recorded and will be made available on our community site, the Platform Academy Forum. Also, we want to make sure your voices are heard. So after the event, there will be a quick survey that helps us improve our content for everyone. And of course, just a quick reminder about Safe Harbor. We might share some new or exciting features today. Well, new and exciting features today. So let's keep everything compliant with those Safe Harbor best practices. And now let's get to the good stuff. I am thrilled to introduce our fantastic speakers, Andrew and Lawrence, as well as Maury, our co-host. And they are going to be talking to us about data privacy. Go right ahead and take it away.
Sounds good. Well, first of all, thank you guys all for joining, gals, guys, everyone. We're going to we're going to cover all of this subject of what is ServiceNow data privacy. But for those of you that are already familiar, let's see if you know the three main components of data privacy. And again, we're talking about non-data privacy, the broader term, but specifically the three components of the ServiceNow data privacy solution. So we'll get that poll going. Let's first get through some of our agenda, what we're going to talk about today. So first, we're going to go over what is data privacy? What is the solution all about? What problems does it solve? Then we're going to talk about the workflow for handling sensitive data in the ServiceNow instance. So a lot of times we have a product, right? We don't want to just ship you features and specific capabilities. What we want to talk through is what is the mindset behind how the tool and the product was developed so that you could take advantage of its full capabilities and really bring all the terminology and all of the different things together in a concise outcome, right, for leading to protecting sensitive data for customers. And then I think the best part is going to be Lawrence and I, we're going to kind of take you through a live demo session. So I'll probably be kind of chatting. It's going to be very informal. Like we're literally going to step through the product. And Lawrence he's the inbound PM for data discovery. So he's the person that's working closely with engineering to making sure that our customer needs are met. So he's going to be hands-on with the product. I'll probably be adding some ad lib and just seeing some of your questions and trying to tie them in. But ultimately, what we want to do is really get hands-on, keep it high level enough, but get into some of the features and how they tie to the objectives. And then last but not least, we're going to try to save 10 minutes for Q&A. And then before we get into actually covering what is data privacy, let's see how you guys did on the poll results. Okay, we have, you know what? I love the results here. So question was, what are the three main components of data privacy? The options were data archiving, data anonymization, data discovery, and data classification. So most of you, everyone got data classification right. People got data anonymization right. Discovery, where we got into an interesting scenario is folks picked data archiving. That is not data privacy, but it is a very important component to the platform. And with that, that's a perfect segue for us to get into what is data privacy then. And Lawrence, feel free to chime in. I think we're going to go step through it, but if you see anything you wanted to add on to, please jump in. But at its core, data privacy is about handling sensitive data within ServiceNow, specifically ServiceNow instances, right? What is sensitive data? It's data that, if accessed or exposed, could have repercussion, whether it's harm to individuals or an organization. The fact is, with with sensitive data, most of the time it makes its way inadvertently into the platform. So it's not about malicious sensitive data ending up in an instance. It's users trying to complete a workflow, fulfillers, requesters that are adding that sensitive data in because they're trying to complete some sort of task, right? And it's not sometimes even an issue that there is sensitive data in the platform. In fact, we have customers that do store sensitive data in the platform, but they're using the appropriate controls for that, whether it be access controls or encryption, other forms of security products. That's that's reasonable. That's fine, right? But what we don't want is sensitive data making its way into descriptions, comments, work notes in places where there's no protections around that data or that data should never exist. That's kind of how we think about and discuss with data privacy. So today we're going to talk about the solution, and really it's about finding your data, detecting it, in other words, discovering data discovery. Then it's classifying that data and labeling it, right? Because once we label our data, we can kind of categorize it and understand the risks around it. And then we could choose how we want to anonymize it. And anonymize it is, striking through the data and overwriting the data, either partially or permanently. We'll go more into that with the hands-on portion. But at its core, as you can see kind of in the diagram over there, we're working both with real-time and data that's made its way, reactive data, going into various tables and applications on the ServiceNow platform. And so the channels could be in a list and form already written there, or it could be an email coming in, it could be Now Assist or virtual agent, or it could be a form. So there's all these different channels is a good way to just talk about it. And that's where the solution comes in, is identifying that sensitive data and either immediately or reactively handling it. Let's talk about the components of data privacy and the solution. So you have data discovery, data classification, data anonymization. This is structured in kind of the workflow, right? You start with discovering your data, classify and anonymize it. It's not always the case. Sometimes customers already have data classification rules in place and they're just discovering new sensitive data. So that can change a little bit, but for the most part, this is the workflow. The other key things to know is that the solution works with both structured and unstructured data. What does that mean? It means data that conforms to a predictable pattern, like a phone number, and unstructured data could be something like a name, right? It doesn't always come to a predictable pattern. It's just based on language. The other thing that we talked about is real-time data as it's making its way into the platform, or data that's already there, or like data at rest. Email data is just like another channel of getting in there, but it's data that makes its way into the ServiceNow instance. Then we could talk about Now Assist, and I think we should probably add virtual agent in there as the Zurich release is here. But anything interacting with AI and LLMs and the Gen AI controller, that's what we talk about when we talk about like Now Assist prompt and response. And then last but not least, model training data. As our customers know, as we learn more about your data and being able to help you understand your data, and we can improve it using AI, right? And there's opt-in options for handling actual customer model data, and some customers will never do it, and that's all right. For customers that want to opt in, but then don't want certain data to be trained on, that's where the model training data comes in. And these are the three reasons. Again, I want to make sure we have as much time as we can to be hands-on. But the three core reasons for data privacy is meeting compliance requirements. Ultimately, that's the number one. Organizations are regulated from GDPR, CCPA, HIPAA, PCI. It has to do with meeting compliance and regulations. AI regulations are really raising the bar with fines and legal risk. In fact, a lot of our recent momentum is customers, as they're getting ready to adopt Gen AI, one of the prerequisites and the precursors for being successful in that, especially worth working with internal auditors and compliance teams, is making sure that you can answer, do we know our data and how are we protecting our sensitive data that it doesn't make its way into an LLM? So that's where data privacy comes in. And so these are some of the questions posed effectively that when we talk to our seller teams and whatnot, these are the kinds of questions that they will be asking and having a conversation about to see if this solution makes sense for you. The second one is reducing security risks before they happen. Of course, there's IT policies that are already in place and security policies. What's interesting about data privacy is that, yeah, a lot of it is about security, right? Where there's sensitive data being exposed, but sometimes there's just proprietary information, right? Like IP theft. So we're kind of at an interesting intersection of both proprietary and sensitive secure data that should be considered. And there's, of course, costs associated with, focusing on the actual business objectives. And then last but not least, it is a business differentiator in terms of how organizations are protecting and safeguarding customer data. And so what we're hearing from customers and more is some customers won't do business with certain types of organizations if there's been a history of inappropriate data handling or just breaches, right? So it is a differentiator for the organizations that really invest in it as something that puts them as kind of a brand leader, so to say. So bringing it all together real quick at a really simple example, and this is where Lawrence and I are going to kind of take you through today, is we start with data discovery that helps us identify, hey, there is a social security number or a birth date or a credit card number within a particular table within a ServiceNow instance, right? You identify it, you see, oh, well, we've gotten several tables and several patterns that were matched. What do we do about it? Okay, we classify it and say, well, it's restricted, PII. How is it being classified? And then we anonymize it with data anonymization. So that's the basic workflow today at a very, very high level. But we'll look through and work through all the steps there. Real quick on just some of the, target industries and example use cases. We're not going to go through all of them, but this is just going to be a good primer for those of you that are joining us today, just to think about which one of these resonate with you. And feel free to add to the chat if there's something that isn't there, or as you see the hands-on portion, you think of something, let us know. But these are just some of the examples that customers, that we work with today of why they use it and some of their use cases. But there are a lot more. Pretty much anything comes down to any kind of sensitive data. There's a good use case here for data privacy. And then the other thing I really want to touch on before we get into the, I guess, quote unquote, the fun part or get the hands-on part is um, let's talk about the workflow, right? So we've talked about data discovery, classification, anonymization. So it all starts with identifying what does my organization consider to be sensitive data, right? That's a discussion that you have that has nothing to do with technology and just classifying and establishing what is sensitive data, what should be looked for, right? Then it's identifying which applications within ServiceNow may host customer sensitive data or which application should. And then if they do, should they be in a specific column? Should certain data never exist in this particular field or table? So that's the next part of the conversation. The next part is, okay, well, now we're getting tactical, right? What are some of those tables that are associated with those applications? And the platform has capabilities of seeing applications and seeing which tables are associated with them. Then it's a question of what type of sensitive data is found and where. So we'll get into it, but there's effectively patterns that you set up for being able to identify that sensitive data. we start with what was identified, and then how should it be classified for this type of sensitive data or this type of table? How should we classify that particular data? And then last but not least is how should we handle it? So we'll talk about this, I think, towards the end. But with the data privacy solution, it's really an all or nothing approach. If you know that you don't want that data to exist, you permanently override it or anonymize it. That's what we're really talking about when it comes to anonymization. So it's overwriting and permanently deleting that data. Now, within ServiceNow and platform security, there are other controls that you could use, right? We're not going to be talking about those today, but just to give you an idea, zero trust access, platform encryption, field encryption. You might send your logs to a log export service. And then for like a mid server, you might use code signing, kind of more edge case. But for the most part, it's a decision between access controls, encryption, and anonymization. Those are going to be the most common scenarios and maybe zero trust access as well. Yeah. And with that, Lawrence, I think I warmed them up. I think I kind of went through as much as I could in, well, I did pretty well. Like, 16 minutes is my timer saying. So I think this is the portion that I'm most excited about. And again, folks, like bear with us. This is a live demo, live instance. We're just going to kind of talk through it and really get hands-on just enough. And then again, park your questions into the Q&A feature. I'll try to see if there's any questions that come up that we can answer on the fly. Otherwise, we'll have 10 minutes set aside. And with that, I'm going to turn over the screen sharing over to you, Lawrence.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew. I think, yeah, a couple questions have been coming in the chat, so hopefully we address them as we go through the demo. I think we can just touch on one that I saw come in a few times in the chat. It was really around, is this free? Is this licensed? How to get started with it. So I'll just mention, so there are elements of the solution, data privacy, that are free. So the real-time channels that Andrew talked about, Now Assist, data sharing, and then virtual agent. Those actually are core capabilities. So you could install the data privacy app and then go ahead and configure policies to manage those real-time interactions and sensitive data. But every other thing, which is mainly what we're going to focus on today, is licensed. But I will mention that we have a 30-day trial in subprod for these capabilities for customers. I don't know if you wanted to add anything else there, Andrew.
No, I think there's definitely material. If you touch base with our field teams, they should be able to point you in the right direction. There's some really good diagrams of the components. I'll see if there's something we could post on our blog as well that just kind of articulate what Lawrence just shared out loud in a visual as well. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, so I guess we can go ahead and get started. So, Andrew, I think, the idea behind this demo is really we'll walk folks through the different components of what you just talked about: discovery, classification, anonymization. Just to level set with the room, what we've done is we've actually gone ahead and pre-configured a lot of this stuff. So as we walk through, it'll be more, showing how this was done. And then, in some cases, we might run a job here and there, but for the sake of time, we really sort of did a lot of the pre-work. And then the focus of today is to walk you through, the essence of the capabilities, why you would do things a certain way, and sort of, guide you through. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. So data discovery. What is data discovery? Data discovery is the process that you would go through to actually find sensitive data. This is with the idea that, there's a lot of sensitive data on the platform, and some of it is known, some of it is unknown. So when you think about data discovery, it's really supposed to help discover those unknown cases of sensitive data on the platform. So first things first, you land on this overview page. This is sort of, a best impression of a compliance dashboard. So if you're an admin or a data governance team, this is supposed to give you, up-to-date insights into, what types of sensitive data am I seeing on the platform? where am I seeing that sensitive data, the tables. What have I done about that sensitive data? Have I classified it? Have I not done anything? Are these new findings that, just came in and I need to go do something about them? And then the other thing is attachment. So we support sensitive data discovery and attachments, and I'll talk through that during the demo as well. But that's another very, important solution for customers because, the data is in plain text, can be entered, but attachments are a very common way, especially when you think about ITSM and, fulfillers working on any of these tickets. Attachments are a very common way people provide, additional details, screenshots, etc. So with that, I will go into the main components of data discovery. So we've started with the reporting capability, but then I'll go into what we call sources. And sources is just an umbrella term for what we call patterns and tables. I'll talk a bit about patterns. So, sensitive data is out there. How do we find the sensitive data, right? Regular expression is the most common way to find structured data. But then when you think about it, sensitive data has multiple forms. Like Andrew talked about earlier, there are things like, names, addresses, um, political affiliation, like things that you could combine to actually extrapolate who an individual is, going down to the letter of the law, the way like GDPR talks about PII, is like individual components that can identify someone or can be combined to identify someone. So unstructured data is another form of in which we like manage data on the platform. So patterns are very particular to like, the structured ones, but I do want to call out some unstructured cases. So within the platform, you see a lot of different regular expressions. Like on this instance, we have a whole slew of them. Some you can see are out of the box. Some of these have been custom generated for test cases. But what I want to call out is, the ones where you don't see a regular expression, those are the named entity recognition model data patterns that use machine learning to sort of understand the context for these things. So with machine learning, it can basically tell if when in a sentence, the word shell is used, is it shell as in the shell of a snail, or is it shell the company? So that's the sort of machine learning model that we're sort of introducing into the product because regular expression is reliable, especially when combined with keywords,
Hmm.
because that increases accuracy, but models are also super, super good for the unstructured data cases.
Lawrence, real quick. So on the keyword capability, is that essentially how does it work? Does it work with you have like a specific pattern you're looking for, right? And are you kind of saying is it the idea to be able to make sure you target specific information but avoid like false positives, like something that looks like a phone number? Like what's a good example of that? Is there one we could talk about
Yeah,
there?
of course. Like a good example is like age, right?
Hmm.
Any number could be an age. But then when you put a keyword age and the proximity of 30 characters, it's basically looking for, you know, age, that word within 30 characters of the number. Otherwise, it's a number. So
Okay.
it's sort of the idea of like, the sentence is, my age is 95 years old versus, 95 is a number, right? 95 is a number. It wouldn't flag that as an age, but in the first sentence, it would flag that as an age. So it kind of helps you for some of the more generic structured data to increase that accuracy.
Okay. Okay. And now that doesn't apply to model, right? Because the machine learning model already, like it already has that built in, right? So
Mhm.
this is kind of a little bit of how we used to do things. And as we're advancing in AI, ML, and all of these capabilities, we're getting to the point where there's enough learning that we can, with fairly decent accuracy, detect sensitive data.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and sort of on that point, regular expression is something that like, it could get complicated. And we heard that from a lot of customers where it's like, we have so many different types of sensitive data. Like, you have your customer specific, industry specific, instance specific sensitive data. And we have the ability for customers to create what we call custom data patterns. So in the sources here, you can see a couple of these that were already created, but just want to talk through ways we're kind of making it easier for the admins. And what we've introduced here is we've introduced a capability that uses Now Assist to actually generate data patterns. So you could just simply come in here and prompt, and I'll give a quick example here. So you could just prompt and say, let's say I want to create for Bitcoin wallet ID, I want to actually create a custom. So now I say, I want to create a valid regex for Bitcoin wallet ID. And then like any good prompt, you want to provide, context or examples. And then I'll hit generate and give it some time. And while Now Assist is doing its thing, it actually generates a regular expression
Wow.
for you and gives you an explanation as to how it arrived at that.
Okay, that's really cool. So I, as someone that used to have to write regular expressions back in my like VoIP, I'm not even going to like SIP routing and things like that, and I've had to do that a little bit here. This is a game changer because I always have to like look up all the rules and the patterns. It's not something that stays top of mind. So this is amazing. Uh,
Yeah. And I think the beauty of this is like with prompting, right? With good examples, good context, it should be able to sort of help you generate. And just, sort of going back to that point of like making sure everything
yeah,
works. You can test it before you actually, the way I go about this normally with customer demos is like for healthcare, I'll get, different medical beneficiary IDs, for example, and make sure that the regex is actually able to detect different permutations before defining that pattern and then using that to scan the instance. So that's definitely one capability that helps with efficiency for the admin.
amazing.
So like I said, I've already pre-done a lot of this. So, that Bitcoin wallet ID example is already actually here. And then sort of the next concept is this idea of target tables. But all of this is actually in here as like a laundry list, but really the way to actually configure this for a scan is through policies. Now, what are policies? Policies are a way to define, what are you looking for? Where are you looking for it? And then those policies are the things you use to actually execute a job to find those things wherever they are. So the way I like to think of a policy is like it's a very nice way to configure what you want to look for, because then you have different types of policies for different types of scans that you want to run. And it helps you with like sort of that efficiency of like, okay, I know what policy is for what. So I'll give an example in this policy here. I've said, I want to look for some things like Bitcoin wallet IDs, emails, phone numbers, Indian Aadhaar numbers. And the next question is where. So where I want to look for this is I want to look for it in the incident table and specifically in the description field. Now, that level of granularity is something that's very helpful when you're thinking about efficiency of your scans, right? You could scan the entire incident table, which is great. But if you know with, specifically where you want to look for it, we allow that level of granularity as well. So that's something to call out in terms of, I think over time, the first few scans could be at a table level, but the moment okay, these are the places where I'm consistently seeing users upload attachments or users actually enter sensitive data, you could get more granular with the scans. So that's a policy that we have. The next piece after the policy is scheduling the actual discovery job. So I have run a job already. So what I did here was I ran some jobs yesterday, and I'll just open a job to give an example of like, the type of things that come back from a job. So when a job runs, it tells you this is just context of what it scanned, what it looked for, but more importantly is like the findings, right? I'll go to the incident table in a second to actually show this incident and what was found in it. But really, what we do is after a job is run, when you actually configure a job, the job basically you select a window to run the job. And maybe just for sake of clarity, I would actually just show you what
Hmm.
configuring a job looks like, because I think it will be really helpful for the audience. So these are the different things to select, right? A scan type. Let's say I'm running this for the first time. I really want to gain some confidence that there is sensitive data on my instance. I could pick sample. A sample scan picks 10,000 random records and scans for whatever you configured in the policy. So it goes into your incident table description and 10,000 random records and is like, hey, you do have some sensitive data there. Okay, then I know I actually want to go through the proper steps of actually running a real discovery job. So that's one type. Second type, incremental. Now, incremental and full is a very new concept we introduced, and I'll sort of talk through them because I think they're really, really cool ways for an admin to understand what sensitive data is on their instance. A full scan, think about it as the very first time. Coming into this, I want to scan any and everything. I don't know what's out there. That's a full scan. Incremental is the idea of a delta scan that picks up from the last time a full scan ran. So the advantage there is like, number one, obviously time savings. You're not scanning records over and over again. But number two, when records are modified or added, incremental scans pick that up. So it's sort of this like, efficient way to make sure you always have a good look into, your sensitive data landscape today. But
Hmm.
I do want to call out, if you run a full scan, and say 3 months later, you have an auditor come in and they're like, hey, that data is stale. It's 3 months ago. Do you have a more recent scan? You can rerun a full scan to get like a point in time view of your sensitive data landscape. I just want to call that out. That's another very important call out. Attachments only, that involves scanning tables for only attachments and not necessarily any of the columns of free text. That's another efficiency gain if you really want to know what type of information am I really seeing in the attachments.
Lawrence, real quick, this comes up a lot. What are the different like attachment formats that are supported?
Yeah, so great question. So we support today docx, so Microsoft Word docs. We support PDF. We support text files. We support Excel, and then we support CSV files. So there's additional file types to come. We're always sort of, iterating based on customer feedback on that. But I think that's a great question because, these incidents and cases always have so many different types of sensitive data put into the attachments.
Awesome. Thank you.
Of course. So that's an overview of like the job framework. And then this is the job that I ran yesterday. So just going into the job and, I talked about this concept of finding findings. These are the data patterns that were found and where they were found. So, the table, the exact column. And then the next really important thing, which Andrea touched on earlier, is this concept of available protection. So available protections, I'll touch on it briefly, but it basically shows a list of like the things you can apply to these findings. So normally, like, because this is not a real finding now, because I've already classified it, normally you would see, access control list, encryption, anonymization. What are the different ways you can protect this sensitive data right from there, right from the finding itself? But I also want to call out that right here in the findings, there's also the option to classify the data. This brings us to that next module. So everything I talked about now is discovery, configurations, what I want to look for, where I want to look for it. But the next step is, okay, how do I tag this data? Because the most important part of classification is the bedrock for protection. So based on how you classify data as an organization, that helps you understand how to protect that data. So for example, these two things here, it says they're classified already, but if I were to classify them, I've created a data class that I call sensitive data. You can
Mm-hmm.
create any data class. It could be public, internal, restricted, confidential, PII, PHI, and then you're classifying at a table column level. So you take the column, in this case, description, the table, task, which is parent of incident. You're classifying those in this sensitive data class, for example. And then where do I go to see this classification? Well, let's go to the next module, which is data classification, right? So I'll just gloss over that real quick. So classification in the new UI sits within anonymization. And as you
Hmm.
can see, this task description table column combination is now under the sensitive data class.
Makes sense. That's the association, right? And
Yeah,
then I assume then there's got to be some relationship between classification and anonymization.
that's correct. So like I said, classification really, like discovery is the first step. Well, because classification is available to all customers out of the box, a lot of customers actually sometimes manually classify data. Like they know what tables and columns that they're most sensitive, so you can manually classify. So we give you that flexibility. Of course, discovery is the best way because there's a lot of dark data and data you don't know about. But after classification is anonymization. So I know Andrew touched on it earlier, but I'll reiterate. Anonymization on the platform, we think about it in two ways, right? There's anonymizing data as it comes in real time. And then there's also data that's already on the platform and you want to anonymize. So think about the first use case as real time could be data in production, data in conversational interfaces, agents, Now Assist. And then the second case of data already on the platform, think about cloning. So you're cloning from, your prod to subprod or subprod to subprod, and you have sensitive data and you're like, I don't want that in the hands of developers or testers. How do I set up a clone policy? And that's a concept that lives within data anonymization as well. So going back to what I talked about earlier about policies, same thing applies here. A framework for you to set the whole thing up so you can understand what's about to happen. Before I go into policies, same way in discovery, we talked about what am I looking for? Where am I looking for it? With anonymization, it's important to know how can I anonymize the data. So I want to
Mm.
touch on a couple ways we can anonymize data. We offer a couple out of the box base techniques, if you will. Um, think about them as, static replace. So I want to replace all emails with the word email, maybe in parentheses. Random replace. I want everything to just be randomized so that anyone who gets access to this data won't be able to tell. I want to remove the data completely. I just want that data gone. I can also say, you know what, I'm okay with this data there in this data class, no action, or selective replace from the start at the end. So that's a very great example of partial anonymization.
Mm.
So I have an SSN, I want to keep the last four, but I want to get rid of the first five because my agents might need the last four or the last four helps, but you understand it's a social security number.
So preserving some context of what it was without exposing the full,
The full,
the sensitive
exactly.
nature of it. Okay. Yeah.
Yep. And then one other thing to touch on is this concept of data pattern anonymization. This applies to string data. So everything we've been talking about, think about it as, someone just enters an SSN in a field, just SSN. But what if it's part of this larger chunk of information? That's where data pattern anonymization comes in, where for each thing entity found, it anonymizes it based on whatever technique. So in a sentence that's my name is Lawrence, my email is this, my SSN is this. It keeps the parts. It's like my name is XXX, my social security is XXX with the last four, my email is xxx@gmail.com, for example. So it's a great way for to work with string fields to make sure that it's not just the whole thing becomes X's or randomized, but instead each data pattern as it's found is handled
Mm.
independently. So that's an overview of the techniques. You can customize as needed. The custom techniques build on the base techniques. So we've seen customers get really, shifty where it's like they want to find KB numbers, but they want to keep the KB. So, it's a KB number, like things like that. And you can identify custom techniques for the policies. So now I've touched on that. I'll go ahead and just talk about this policy that I have here. This policy is for the sensitive data class, right? We just tagged the task description to this data class. But I really want to touch on this concept of activating a policy during cloning. Now, this is a great way to make sure that as soon as your clone happens, sensitive data is scrubbed in your target instance. And with these anonymization policies, for example, I could just run it on the subprod instance, or I could trigger it from the source instance like prod. And then
Mm,
this policy, as part of the clone process, once the cloning is done, it's a post-clone script that's triggered, and all the tables in the subprod instance are like anonymized accordingly. So I just want to
nice.
call out, you have the ability to run this on the instance, or, for, I guess, better privacy management, you would run this as a clone, as a post-clone script. Um, so touch on the techniques a bit, right? In the task description field, I have this data pattern anonymization technique. This is because obviously I want to preserve some of the context in the field, but only each entity will be anonymized. And then this is how I want each entity to be anonymized. So I want selective
Okay.
replace with X, so everything becomes an X. And like,
Lots of granularity. Yeah.
yeah,
Being able to tailor it to the specific type of data and not just a
data.
class. Yeah.
Yep. So this is the policy. I'll go ahead and schedule a job. So this one I'll do live, so we actually see some things work. Um, so let's call this, and then frequency. It's another really cool thing. Being able to run these periodically is very helpful for the admin, right? You want sensitive data scrubbed every so often. So you have the option to configure these jobs to run weekly, monthly, at a recurring cadence. So, you can anonymize sensitive data. For today, I'll just choose run once. And then the window. So the window is something that's very, very integral to all our frameworks for both jobs and anonymization. We will always specify time windows because we tell customers, depending on the size of data you have on your instance, these could take hours. So we typically recommend off business hours, scheduling these for like weekends or like non-peak times. But for example, if you're running a Delta scan, arguably, the amount of data in between runs, let's say a recurring job is running every week, the first run is the biggest chunk, unless there's some big data migration or data integration, I should say. Typically, those incremental runs should take shorter periods of time, but you want to schedule these for when, there's minimal downtime, and it won't necessarily impact instance performance. And then there's the option of a dry run. A dry run is a way of saying, what is this going to do, right? I don't want it to do anything, but can you show me what it would do? And a dry run is a great way to like make sure what's about to happen is really what you intend to happen. So I'll go ahead here and schedule this job. And you see here, I think I put it here, so it's in progress. Let's see. So it's completed. So now what's the best way? So let's go to the incident table and look at that incident where I had the details. So in here, I had a wallet ID, I had an Indian Aadhaar number. Both were successfully anonymized with the technique that I selected, which is selective replace with X, I believe is what I had configured. And then there's also this concept here of, I had an attachment here. I'll go ahead and show what was in the attachment. So the attachment actually contained an email, a phone number, and this was just sort of like a typical case. I'm triaging the case, and the user is like, here's my email, here's my phone number, in case you need to reach me. And we have the concept of attachment findings. So if I go into these real quick, go into attachment findings, you'll see, in this incident, I found the email and the phone number. So this another, sort of way, it's like I found the data in the tables, I anonymized it, but when I ran the discovery earlier, I also have this concept of finding data and attachment. So this was technically discovery, but I forgot to show it earlier, but just want to touch on the fact that we did scan, we found data in the tables, and then we also found data in the attachments. So now I think going into the next piece of this, I think it's super important to talk about journal fields. So yes, I've anonymized the data here, but as usual with cases, there's interactions going on, and there's like, oh, this details were missing, something else. And in the journal fields, that's where we see a lot of sensitive data. So similar, let's say, this is just hypothetically an admin is saying, oh, user made a mistake.
Hmm.
Here is the correct wallet ID, just given wallet ID. And then I paste the Bitcoin wallet ID and I hit post. And what you see here is that this is the correct wallet ID that was provided. But I want to go back to another concept in anonymization, which is real-time anonymization. So real-time anonymization is another type of policy. So the one we talked about earlier was for cleaning up or cloning. In real time, what you can configure is a policy for comments, work
Mm.
notes, and additional journal fields, as well as real time in tables as well. And what that would do is like once you configure a policy, as that data is entered in journal fields, that data gets anonymized on the fly.
Oh,
So
wow. Wow. So this is like bringing it all together.
yeah,
So you have your data pattern, you have your anonymization pattern, you have the specific tables. It's effectively don't run anything. Data privacy will just, as sensitive data makes its way there, before it's even written to the database, it would get anonymized.
that's correct. And
Okay.
I wanted to show the job scenario first because I think that's a very popular use case with cloning. But
Hmm.
really wanted to touch on the RTA use case as well, because a lot of times after you've run these cleanup jobs, you kind of get a sense of, okay, this is where sensitive data keeps making its way in. And how do I configure a real-time policy for those particular fields? And so that's another component that we have.
Amazing.
So I think that's everything on anonymization. I think we've talked about real-time policies. I don't know if we wanted to go a little bit into some of the Now Assist and Gen AI use cases, if there's enough time, Andrew.
Yeah, we have about a minute. I do want to
Okay.
make sure we have time for Q&A, but why don't you just talk about it? Just talk
Yeah,
about it at a high level.
at a high level, yeah. So when we think about AI security, I think it's beyond really data on the instance. So I really want to touch on the fact that for AI security, the main concern a lot of customers have is data leaving their instance and going to the LLMs, right? That data going to the LLMs, how do we make sure LLMs are not getting our customer sensitive data? And that's where data privacy for Now Assist comes in. There's a lot of documentation out there. I'll urge everyone on the call to go look at documentation. It's a surefire way to mask data going to the LLMs and back, and it's very important for AI governance and AI security. And I think it's one capability we launched in Yokohama. We enhanced it in Zurich to include virtual agent and all the agent conversations. So just think about this as anytime you execute a skill, run an AI agent, um, enter a Now Assist prompt, or are talking with a virtual agent, any sensitive data in those real-time interactions is masked. And I think that's another really important piece to call out. So that's also it's creating a policy, real-time data. I could go through it, but I know we're short on time and you can select the channels in here. But very similar concept to, the whole policy framework we talked about earlier.
Yeah, it's just a new channel, and that is for Now Assist and Virtual Agent customers. They would use the data privacy application as of the Zurich release,
Mhm.
but that component doesn't require, like people are asking about subscription entitlement.
Nope.
That's just for all of our AI customers. We believe that's just a core foundational thing that needs to exist. But it's a good stepping stone, right? If you already have it set up for keeping an eye on your AI channels, now you could say, okay, well, now that we're familiar with this tooling, we can go in and, reactively scan some of our tables or set up some of those RTA policies.
Yep.
Okay. Let's do this. So I have a couple of closing slides, but I want to make as much time as possible for the questions. So let's just jump over to that real quick.
Mhm.
Um, you could take a look. I know you've been like heads down on a couple of things, but let me pick one that I think was a really good one. Someone talked about can you anonymize based on roles? I think we didn't spend too much time talking about least privilege, but I'll answer that real quick and you can add on, Lawrence. So
Mhm.
we do have different types of roles in the product built in to make sure that there's a separation of duties. In fact, when you saw that Lawrence did the demo of discovery, it showed you that there was sensitive data detected, but it didn't show you the specific incident that actually had the which record had the sensitive data in there. And what's interesting is that started out as a feature so that you could run our tooling without necessarily having someone, being able to see sensitive data, right? Well, we obviously know that our customers need a way to validate, is that actually, sensitive data or not? So one thing we didn't talk about, but there's a granular configurations and a granular findings feature. And what that feature does is acts like a watcher of, hey, I want to keep an eye on for this particular pattern, this particular table. If there is a match, show me the exact record that has that sensitive data in there. So what you are able to do is click into it and actually see where the sensitive data is. And then you could resolve, you can anonymize it there and there, or you could, ignore it. But that's an important feature for giving access to someone to be able to perform that and actually see that sensitive data, and feel confident that we're targeting the right things. And then when you're doing this at scale, you don't actually have to look at it. You just have to have confidence in your data patterns. But I'll see if I could post the link on all the roles in the documentation. But if you look for data privacy and roles, you should be able to find it.
Mhm. Yeah. Nothing else to add. That was great. Yeah.
Any other questions you see that you want to jump out at you? We talked about
Yeah.
the subscription part that, yeah, you need a ServiceNow Vault entitlement or a standalone data privacy entitlement. And then for the AI skills, like the regex, text to regex, that does require any Pro Plus SKU. So, and if you already have a Pro Plus SKU and you have assists, it would just come out of your allocation of assists for that.
Yep. Yeah, I think the other thing that is sort of coming up that I wanted to touch on is the first one was, are there any out-of-the-box patterns for countries outside the US? And if not, is there any guidance for regex format? So coming up next year, we are introducing a little bit more of like a global list of data patterns, but we still always, encourage customers to leverage like this generate regex, which is sort of like just generative AI to help you identify country-specific data patterns. We're trying to get as exhaustive as possible, but given every different, geography, regulation, everything, it's kind of hard to define a laundry list out of the box. So that's why we brought that AI capability into the product to help you, define those on the fly. Second question, can we test data privacy discovery on PDI? The answer is yes. So we touched on it a little earlier around the 30-day trial, but the 30-day trial is a great way to kind of go in there, all the features that I just showed today, play around with them. You get a 30-day free trial, and, verify where the data is, understand how it would work before you actually go ahead and get the licensed product. So I just wanted to answer those two questions.
Awesome. Awesome. I mean, I think there's a couple, I think you touched on most of them. There were some scenarios that were, I think someone was asking about, we have a use case from a customer of education industry to mark
Mhm.
some incidents as confidential, and only few people and roles can access, read and write to those incidents. I think we need to learn more about the requirements there, but it could be a combination of access controls or even encryption, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that use case came up on a couple customer calls, and I think you're getting towards marking it as confidential would be sort of like sensitive data based ACLs or encryption, and the closest compensating control, if you will, to that today is classifying the data, but then in Zurich we're coming up with role level encryption. So that the idea with role level encryption is to kind of provide customers with a little more granularity when defining who can access certain things. So I think that's another candidate for like the role level encryption. based on a data class. But it's going to involve a little bit of configuration because today we have anonymization and encryption working together, but we don't have it to where it would control, the read and write access to those incidents. But as of Zurich, you can anonymize encrypted data. But this idea of like being able to access based on data class would involve a little bit of manual configuration.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks, Lawrence. And then Beth had a good one.
Mhm.
She's
I'll read
talking
it next.
about how there's like host names and devices. Sounds like they, maybe I don't know if they're an MSP, but they work with multiple customers and there's different names and they're in short descriptions. And it's saying consider this data as the host name based off of naming conventions of a customer, and each customer has their own naming convention. Like, how do they go about setting that up? I think like
Yeah.
they need to, my thoughts off the hand and you add on, but like you would have to understand if there's like some sort of convention because you would have to set up a rule, right, with those regular expression patterns.
Mhm.
If they conform to some sort of pattern. Unfortunately, anytime we talked about names, that's tricky, right? If there's no method to the madness, then that could be challenging. But
Agreed. Yeah. You would need some sort of structure. And then I think that's where keywords might come in, right? Is if there's any keywords that precede or proceed any of these things, then you can add those keywords. But that's a constraint with regular expression, right? Is like it needs some sort of structure or format. So that's what I'll call out for that use case.
yeah. And then that would apply to, tables as well as the LLMs as well. So that you would probably have similar rules and patterns, just different channels that you would be applying
Yes.
it to. Yeah.
Mhm. I think Michael's question was data. I think that was what I call data privacy for Now Assist. That's like the
Mm.
official product name, but really that's anything to do with your Gen AI Now Assist capabilities, being able to configure sensitive data detection and anonymization for those. We have a lot of documentation on that as well.
I'm just going to wrap it here, but instead of like going through slides, just thank you guys all for joining us. Let us know what you thought of the session. Give us feedback. We wanted to do something a little bit more hands-on and a little bit approachable. Please get in touch with your account teams as need be. We're here to help. But just a couple of key points. Again, there's data discovery, data classification, data anonymization. Does require either a Vault entitlement or a standalone one for data privacy and a Pro Plus for some of the AI assisted features. There is a 30-day trial. Again, you can spin up a PDI now and be able to evaluate it. Some of the AI capabilities won't be there, but for the most part, you should be able to get your hands on it. And then you could do this, 30-day trial, either prod or sub prod. After that, it does require a license or entitlement, but I think that's a quick way of evaluating if this is the right solution for you. And yeah, we'll have more of these to come, maybe talking a little bit about like the cadence of how often you should be doing this and going into some of the specific use cases. But I think that's a wrap. And Lawrence, do you have any other parting words of wisdom, anything you wanted to add?
No, nothing else. No, thanks everyone for your time. And yeah, over to you, Sharon.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that wisdom that you bring to us. I do want to say on the topic of future academies that we will be having some of this group back to tell us more in the upcoming weeks. But this Thursday, we're going to be talking about UI Builder. So that one question we had in Q&A that looked like it was about UI Builder components, bring that question back for Thursday. We will have an expert for you then. And then next Tuesday, we will be talking about what's new with Zurich for agent experiences as well. And also want to comment that while you have found our Platform Academy, and in my opinion, we're the best, we have amazing other products, amazing other features and academies that go through those, including our analytics, AI Academy, or our process mining academy. So take a chance to look those up as well. And then if you are looking for even more information on how to use this amazing platform, do keep in mind we have the ServiceNow Impact, training and certification and expert services. Other than that, thank you so much for joining us. Lawrence, Andrew, Mari, thank you again. And for all of our attendees, we hope you have a beautiful day, and we will see you later this week. Bye all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.